This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. For this episode of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast, we are again in Belgium. In fact, on the very far west end of Belgium, walking distance to the French border here on the west side of Belgium. And the occasion for this is a conversation with Wouter de Lee and Marco Passarelli. Wouter is the head brewer for St. Bernardus, and Marco is the head of international sales for St. Bernardus. Welcome to the podcast, Wouter.
Hello, thank you.
And welcome, Marco.
Hi there.
We've had a beautiful experience here at St. Bernardus. Joe Stang, our executive editor, and I stayed in the guest house here last night. And here we are in a foggy morning here in the Flemish countryside, enjoying a podcast here and the beautiful experience they've built at the brewery. A pretty fantastic walking tour, self-guided tour, audio tour, bar and restaurant on the rooftop. It's quite the destination out here in Wouter, or the outskirts of Wouter in the countryside. Beautiful, beautiful place, and of course, beautiful beers. We're going to talk about the St. Bernardus approach to brewing those abbey-style beers that our readers voted in 2022. In our reader survey, we're going to talk about their approach to brewing those beers. It's Wouter's very first podcast, and we're very honored
Yes,
to talk about brewing with St. Bernardus this morning. Before we do that, at G&D Chillers, they always strive to build great chillers. Partner with them as you build great beer. Kevin Toger from Bearded Iris Brewing says G&D Chillers have been a valuable partner throughout our growth. They build high-quality equipment and know their machines extremely well. Most importantly, their customer service is best in class, which is a huge value add to our internal teams that manage these critical support systems. Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring of your new G&D chiller. And ProBrew is the industry partner that brewers trust to take their operations to the next level, especially when it comes to canning their product for distribution. By partnering with ProBrew, brewers can fill and seam their canned product. It ranges from 100 to 600 cans per minute. Their unique filling process also ensures low dissolved oxygen pickup and focuses on product quality during the entire process. For more information, visit probrew.com or email them at contactus@probrew.com. ProBrew, brew your beer. Also, Old Orchard has supplied flavored craft juice concentrate blends to over 46 states for the production of fruit-forward beer, cider, seltzer, wine, spirits, and more. By partnering with some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape, Old Orchard has become a go-to source of fruit-forward ingredients. To learn more and request your free samples, head on over to oldorchard.com/brewer. Well, why don't we start with a little bit of history? There's a lot of history here.
There is.
A lot of history. And you've been around, Marco, for quite a bit of it, 20 years of it.
Yeah, I've been here 20 years now.
Yes. Why don't you give us the history, quick history in a nutshell, and then we can talk about some of the branches that history has taken along the way.
Mm-hmm. Our brewery was actually founded in 1946, just after the Second World War. And it was founded with just one purpose: to brew and commercialize the beers of a Trappist monastery close by called West Flatteren. And to do so, the brewmaster of West Flatteren became a partner in our brewery. So in 1946, he came over. His name was Mathieu Safransky, and together with 2 brothers who previously owned a cheese factory, they started a brewery, and they did that here in Wouter, about 7 miles away from West Flatteren. The brewmaster brought along all the recipes and the know-how, some technical equipment as well, and most importantly, he brought along the yeast strain from St. Sixtus, and we started brewing for them under license. And the beers were called Trappist Westvleteren. A little bit later on, they were called Saint Sixtus, which was the name of, or is the name of the abbey. And for many years we brewed for them. In 1963, the license that we had to brew their beer, which was originally 30 years, so from 46 to 76, in 63 it was renewed because the daughter of one of the two brothers, Evariste de Koning's daughter, Bernadette, married Guy Claus, and they prolonged the license to sell their beer. So that license then came to an end in 1992 when we stopped making their beer. But we decided to just keep on brewing the same beer with the same recipe, but under a different brand name, which was Saint Bernardus. That had always been the name of the brewery because it was also the name of the cheese factory. I told you that the two brothers, they had a cheese factory before. So that was the name of the brewery. Maybe interesting to know is that that cheese factory was founded in 1904 and actually also stemmed from another Trappist monastery, also 7 miles away, but in the other direction, in the French direction, on the mountain. Well, we call it mountain, but it's a little hill.
Sure.
It's called Mont des Cats. And there is a Trappist monastery there in France. You can actually see it from here, from our rooftop. And they started the cheese factory, and then they sold it to the two brothers who made it bigger and bigger, and then were able to start a brewery as well after the Second World War.
Sure. Now, over that time, the idea of what, Trappist or abbey-style beers has also continued to evolve, and the range has expanded as the market also asks for things, and beers like Wit have come back and come around and grown up. It is not exactly. There have been some changes in the kinds of beers, or then, of course, a market looking for lower alcohol beers has found things like Potter beer and smaller beers, and so you all have grown, even from what those original beers were.
Originally in 1946, the Trappist monks gave us 4 recipes, 4 beers, a 4, a 6, an 8, and a 12. The 4, we stopped brewing that in the 70s, but the 6, the 8, and the 12 we brew until today. They themselves stopped brewing the 6, so they don't do that anymore, because the 6 also used to be a dark beer. But the 8 and the 12 are 2 of the beer, the 6, the 8, and the 12 are 3 of the 4 beers that we still brew with the same recipe. In the 70s, we stopped making the extra 4, but we brought it back in 2014, I think, about 10 years ago. But not under the same recipe, but with a blonde beer this time, but in the style of that, in that same single style, which is a low ABV, 4.8%, very drinkable, what you guys would call session beer, I guess. So this is the beer that we think you can drink all day.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then, of course, here at the brew, you also make some other brands now, too.
You have to know that I'm telling this story as though this was all very easy. But in 1992, of course, we lost our name. We weren't called what we used to be, so we had to like revamp the brewery. And while we did that, we also decided that we're going to make a triple, which we launched in 1992. And that has become a very important beer for the brewery. I guess it's fair to say that over the years we've added a few other beers as well. Like I said, we added the Extra 4 again in 2014. I guess around 2000 we also started making a wit, which is our wheat ale, and then we added the Tokyo, we added the Christmas ale. So we did add a lot of beers since then. In total now we have 9 beers. But the 2 most important and iconic or most sold beers of the brewery are still that St. Bernardus Ab 12 and the triple that we launched in 92. So yeah.
It's interesting to think about that, especially as beer in America right now and brewing businesses in America, face some challenges of the overall marketplace. That this is also the story of Belgian beer, constant challenges in the marketplace, whether that's launching a beer brewing business in an immediate post-war period of 1946 amidst massive reconstruction, throughout Europe, of finding new ways of having to always think about reinvention and development and growing, as well as experience, which is also the thing that you all are investing heavily in now to build not just great beer, but also a great experience for people that want to come see that beer here. But that process of having to constantly develop and innovate within a range that also makes sense for the overall brand is something you've been doing every decade or years and years and years and years.
You look at the market and you think what type of beer would be good for us to try and make in the future as well. Because if you just do those recipes that you've had forever, then there's no fun in brewing as well. You have to have a little bit of fun and make sure that it's not all. What I mean to say, it's not always all about direct sales, or
Sure.
It's not always about making the next locomotive of the brewery, because we have a really good locomotive. It's called Ab 12. There is actually another beer in the area of the brewery. We sell the most, the best sold beer is St. Bernardus Triple. We can find it in a lot of places on draft. Even a nice thing to know about that beer is that most people don't call it St. Bernardus Triple, but they will go to the bar and order a Bernadette. Because that was the name of the previous owner of the brewery, Bernadette. She used to run the bed and breakfast, actually, that you guys were staying in, the Brouwershuis. And she really liked that beer, and that was her favorite. So after a while, everybody started calling the beer after her, which we still honor today, and that we like to tell that story.
Sure. Wouter, what is your history, background, and brewing experience? Tell me about that.
My brewing background, so I'm coming from Ghent. I studied brewery in Ghent. I did not do a real solicitation. I just was studying brewmaster, and I got a call from the brewery to ask to come over to have a chat and to look if we could help each other. And so one day I went to here, got a small tour, and after that I said, maybe it's interesting to do. Can I join a brew? So at the early morning, at 6:30 in the morning, I had to arrive in the dark, try to find a brewery here somewhere near the French border. But I succeeded. And so I had to brew the whole day with the old brewmaster. It was fun. It was big fun to do it. Before I didn't do any brews in a big brew house. It was just for trial purposes, small scale, 500 liters. I don't know the volume. So here it was 10,000 liters a lot more. So it was a fun day, and I decided, yes, I can do this. I want to do this, and so I signed my contract and I came to the brewery. It's quite simple.
But Wouter, and what happened 2 weeks after that?
2 weeks later, I signed my contract, and the guy who hired me, he said, I have to tell you something. And
he was the brewmaster, right?
Yeah, the brewmaster said to me, first sign your contract, I have to tell you something later. So I signed the contract. He came back and said, so what did you need to tell me? I'm leaving in 2 weeks, he was saying. So I just was thrown into the water.
So you had to train fast.
I had to train and learn fast, yes. I just jumped into the beer, I think.
Jumped into a big pool of beer, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wouter, how many years ago was that?
This is already 17 years. It's almost 18. It's from 2006. So it's
a very long, consistent history here at St. Bernardus.
Indeed.
Cool. Well, I want to talk about how you all go about and what some of these recipes look like, and what makes your approach to making these beers very distinctive. Obviously, you have yeasts and recipes from the monks that have been handed down. But as all of us know in this world of brewing, a recipe is a great starting place. And what really makes beers distinctive is the process and how you approach making those beers and caring all through the process for the way that you technically produce that. And so I want to explore some of the ways that you all achieve that distinction and that excellence in your beers. Before we do that, experience distinct transparency and juiciness with Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5. Using their Lumina technology, Omega genetically eliminated haze in the popular British 5 strain, allowing you to preserve the fruit-boosting prowess while achieving crystal clarity. Perfect for modern West Coast IPAs. Learn more at info@omegayeast.com. Also, ABS Commercial has been a full-service brewery outfitter for over 10 years. They're proud to offer brewhouses, tanks, keg washers, and preventative maintenance parts to brewers across the country, as well as equipment for distilling, cider making, wine making, and more. They know the ins and outs of the brewing and installation process and can design the perfect setup for you, whether you're just starting out or looking to expand. Contact them today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your customized brewery needs. ABS Commercial, we are brewers. I want to explore some of the basics of some of these recipes. Obviously, for the iconic Abbot 12, but potentially for some of these other beers that you all also make. And generally, where we start is talking about water, because water is such an important part of the brewing process. My experience of your water here is that it's excellent. A much softer water maybe than we had further east in Belgium, and maybe lower in minerals. It seems like it's a good platform to build up into beer, and maybe the water we have here is just being processed by you, and so it tastes so good. But tell me about the water here.
Actually, the water is coming from very deep. We have, I don't know in meters. I don't know in.
It's 450 feet. So
450
it's
feet
150
so
meters.
we have how it's called
a well.
A well, yes. We pump our brewing water from there. It's because it's from so deep. It's soft water. It's very soft. It's got a lot of minerals. For example, chloride. Yes, salt. Actually, so this gives also the taste of our beer, a fulliness of our beer. So with this water, the main ingredient.
Sure.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Every good brew starts with good water. So that's something that I tell a lot on my trips to America. it's important to have a good recipe, but then the ingredients and the quality of them are also very important. So I guess if you start with bad water, you have bad brewing water, then you're going to get a bad beer.
And it's interesting that so many beer styles around the world are very well connected to the quality or the type of water in that place.
In that specific area.
Whether you're talking about England, Germany, or Belgium, the beers that get developed are styles that tend to work well
with the water in that area.
That water in that area. And so it's interesting to see how that also impacts, your approach, to beer here. Let's maybe talk then about grain. Grain and barley is the next major component. How do you approach building this recipe for, say, Abbot 12 from a grain perspective? One thing we don't talk, obviously within this style, there's both grain and there's most likely sugar, candy sugar additions in this. But how do you build a foundation for a beer like Abbot 12?
Actually, we didn't build
the
beer, so we got we got a heritage.
Sure,
it's the recipe we got from earlier. So, but yes, how it is built, I can't tell you.
Sure.
So, but actually, we use a pale malt and a burnt malt because we need to make a brown beer, so we need some color burnt. We also need some extract because we want to have alcohol. So we make a combination of pilsner malt and burnt malt. Yeah, maybe I don't know if it's the right word. Roasted of toasted is maybe a better. It's
caramel or crystal malt or roasted malt.
Roasted, really roasted. So.
To be clear, we buy it from a maltery. Yeah. We don't make our own malt. There are a few breweries that do that still today, but in Belgium, it's regularly used. It's very common to buy it from a maltery.
Right.
Yeah, so we use a maltery from Belgium right now, but they don't source their barley from Belgium. Probably.
Mainly the barley comes from France.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then how do you balance the base malt with that roasted malt? Or how does the recipe then balance those two things?
The main part is the regular malt, I guess, and then a smaller part, depending on the type of beer, is the roasted malt. Wouter.
Yes, it is, but I don't understand your question. How to make the balance? Yeah, it's just you need to make. You have to decide which kind of roast you need. You need to look at the malt, how it's tasting. Actually, we have our recipe. We know these are. Let's say.
The parameters that you want to get.
Things you need to have, and then you have to look up what's needed to receive it, to get to the result. So actually, it's we use a main. Yeah, the main part is actually the pilsner malt.
Do you know what, or can you share what percentage is roasted malt, and what level of roasted malt you use for?
Rather not.
No, they're not. That's fair.
Damn, you forgot you were in Belgium, right?
Oh, well, we're gonna keep. I'll keep trying.
Keep trying. I guess it also depends on the type of beer, and actually, even if we give you a percentage, like what Wouter said, it's also about we always check the malts when they come in, check the specifications and see what we know what we need to get out of it, and then we adapt in function of those parameters. So it's not written in stone for all. It's not the same for all the beers.
That's an interesting point, and maybe we can talk about how you do that in any given year, because if a recipe came to you in 1946, the pale malt or the Pilsner malt then and the roasted malt then is certainly not the same as Pilsner malt and roasted malt that you have now. Barley varieties have changed. The extract potential from those barley varieties has changed. The roasting methods have changed, and so the malts now, because barley is an agricultural product and growers have to be efficient about it, but also focus on flavor. So how in any given year do you then evaluate the changes that come in those barleys as they are delivered to you, and then think about tweaking that recipe and approach and technical process?
So actually, besides all these things you're talking, there is also nature. So if you have a better crop or a less good crop, more proteins and other things that change, you also have to work with that. Maybe more than with the variation on the
longer scale.
On the longer scale. That's more for me it's I don't say the changes of varieties, yes. Change of the varieties is for me is this less a problem than the changes that happen because of a better crop or a worse crop. Because you have a direct a result or not a result because of something happened.
Wouter, is it fair to say that we get analysis made for every batch that we receive, so we know what we're gonna get?
Yes,
is that important, or?
Yes, we get from each batch analysis. That's not a problem, but you also have to work with the malt. You can see on the analysis, you can see a lot, but actually, if you don't work with it, you don't feel it. If you do, for example, filtration and the analysis looks good, but if you look in the filtration, lautering, actually, maybe is lautering the better word.
Yeah.
Then you see differences with the same analysis. You see different lautering curves, so you have to adjust over there. And actually, this makes also you a brewer adapt with these different crops, different deliveries, for example, also make the same beer. You have this with the malts, but also with later on the hops, yeast, everything has his impact, and that makes you a brewer. I don't know if I can say this. if you compare with wine is just it's the year. It's a different year, different wine. For the beer,
but in beer, you want to have a same beer all the time, so you have to adapt.
Sure. How do you adapt? You'll have that information about with the analysis, and you can look at that, and how do you then take that analysis and translate it into your recipe and process?
So we work on a mashing scheme. So we go to a higher or lower temperature. For this mostly. We also look at the enzyme activity. Yeah, that's maybe not so craft.
Oh no, that's right.
So
diastatic power, the ability, for those enzymes to convert.
So somehow you also have to add some enzymes if it's needed, because if you want to make a good beer, you also need to make everything in the brewhouse goes well.
Yeah.
But everything starts with the measurements that you take. So you have the laboratory is up and running and everything's working perfectly. So you know what you're getting, you know what you're doing. You're taking a lot of measurements all the time. Samples, I guess. Samples,
yes, but not from the real beginning. From the raw materials, we don't do a lot of
analysis.
Yes.
Yeah. You only start the analysis in the brew hall.
Talk to me a little bit about using sugars in the brewing process. Obviously, this is a long Belgian tradition, something that is very common here. In America, sugars are generally used maybe in a double IPA to add more alcohol while still, maintaining a light beer. But they're in Belgium, those sugars, and that is generally flavorless sugar, just dextrose, meant to, have that effect on alcohol. Here, sugars are an integral part of also adding flavor and color into the abbey-style beers. Talk to me about how you employ those, within the dark beers that you make.
Yeah, so besides malt, who also provides sugar.
Sure.
Sugar, we also add some sugar for our beers. So we use beet sugar.
Beet sugar?
Yes, because we're in West Flanders. We have Flanders, actually. We have a lot of beets. And we are actually using brown sugar because we make a brown beer.
Mm-hmm.
Why we are using it? Because to make the beer drinkable. If you would make 10% of alcohol beer with full malt, it will be more difficult to drink. It's the drinkability will drop.
Wouter, in what sense would the drinkability drop? It would become more.
It will be a full-bodied beer, but it will be a nice beer. But if you drink one, you don't want to drink another one because you're full of the
Your
beer.
stomach will be full.
Yeah, it's a mouthfeel.
So, but actually, the reason that we are using the sugar in the brew is because that's what the recipe said in the
Yeah,
past. It's not like we invented. We're not the inventors of using sugar in an abbey-style beer in Belgium. So I guess it's a long tradition, and we're upholding it. But we do see the advantages of it for us. I always think that it also has to do with the kind of sugar that we are using. It comes from from beets, so
Right.
it's a beet sugar. It's the sugar that we also use in a day-to-day environment. I don't know if you guys like crepes. Do you like pancakes?
Oh, crepes, sure.
Yeah, so we use pancakes, and I eat my pancakes with stierenboter, and that's a butter that you let melt on your pancake, and you add the brown sugar, cassonade sugar, to it. You mix it, and then it becomes like a bull's butter, stierenboter, and that's very good for your health, and you can go work on the field and be a good cowboy, I guess.
Sure. Well, let's talk about fermentation next, and see if we can explore. Obviously, yeast is very important to abbey-style beers as a major flavor component, and the primary actor in the style in general. The yeast that you have came with the monks, and now is the same yeast that you maintain today. And so I want to talk about some of the ways that you all maintain healthy fermentations, but also fermentations with character and flavor, that also, because it's a balance to maintain character and flavor, but not too much flavor and character, to keep it, as you say, in that very realm of drinkability where it's just enough and not too much. I'd like to talk about how you all do that. But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by Yakima Chief Hops. The 7th annual Veterans Blend from Yakima Chief Hops will be available for pre-order June 24th. $3 from every pound sold of Veterans Blend will be donated to this year's nonprofit Stop Soldier Suicide. The Veterans Blend is dedicated to providing financial support to nonprofits who provide assistance to our military veterans and their families. Plan ahead for your 2024 and 2025 Veterans Day, Memorial Day, and Independence Day beer releases, and place your Veterans Blend pre-order on June 24th. Also, Berkeley Yeast, founded by bioengineers, yeast that's designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency, increase efficiency, and save you money. If you've been following yeast, I'm sure you've heard about their strains. Super Bloom strains make classic hops flavor. Fresh strains keep diacetyl low, even with large hop additions. Tropics strains make a tropical bouquet reminiscent of the finest Southern Hemisphere hops. And they just dropped new strains that are even more futuristic. Nationwide free shipping. Mention this podcast for 20% off your first order. And if you're a brewer who's also interested in distilling, subscribe now to this Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast, available on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Hosted by Sydney Jones, head distiller for Fuse Spirits in Chicago, and Molly Troop, master distiller for Freeland Spirits in Portland, Oregon. This podcast explores the technical and creative processes behind great spirits through conversations with some of the leading distillers working today. It's everything you love about the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast, but focused on distilling. Click on the link in the show notes to give it a listen. So let's talk about yeast and fermentation. There's a story behind this yeast, right? Obviously, the history from the monks, and you've now inherited this yeast, but that also means that this yeast is a very important thing to maintain and to keep healthy, and to make sure that you never lose this yeast. Tell me the story of the yeast.
Well, maybe first we can talk about the fact how do we work? How do we make sure that we don't lose it?
Sure.
And then maybe secondly we can talk about what we do to work with it. So Wouter, how do we not lose it?
So our yeast is in the University of Leuven into the fridge, very cold temperature.
Sure.
To stay over there to be the backup or the startup for a new generation, I don't know.
Right. You can always get a new pitch.
A new pitch. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for this new pitch, we can go back to the University of Leuven, where they prepare the yeast for us, so we can start new fermentations. We keep this yeast using for several generations, and after several, we have to change again to make sure the yeast doesn't mutate, doesn't change the aroma, doesn't change the flavor. How we pitch the yeast on the several worts. So actually, we use in the brewery, we use the Darauflassen principle.
Darauflassen.
Yes. So, do you know this?
I know Darauflassen.
So
you're brewing over 2 days, and you're then, pitching an initial pitch of yeast.
Yeah.
We have talked about Darauflassen on the podcast before.
Okay. So, actually, this makes the yeast stays vital, gives it more advantage, more power to ferment, to make the beer good, and actually, it's a proven principle we are using, since ever, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So we always start with half a fermentation tank, but we separate on two, and then the next day we add a second brew on it with fresh wort, fresh oxygen, so the yeast can again multiply and you
oxygenate again on the
we
on the second day.
Oxygenate on the second one, yes.
And you pitch on the first day enough yeast to ferment that first half, and then count on that growth and multiplication to, or you pitch more yeast on the second day, or
no,
just oxygenating that wort.
Yes. So on the first day we add yeast for the first brew to start this fermentation.
Mm-hmm.
The first part of the fermentation is the aerobe phase. So the aerobic phase, the yeast is multiplying, not producing alcohol but multiplying. So make more young yeast.
Sure.
So, and then after that, it goes over to the anaerobic phase, so it starts producing alcohol. But the second day we add wort again with oxygenated, and then the yeast is multiplying again, so it gives, let's say, a restart, making the yeast extra vital, because it's young yeast from young yeast. It's giving more power to give a fluent and consistent fermentation till the end, till all the fermentable sugars are
Gone.
gone.
Sure,
Yes,
sure.
transformed. That was the word.
Yeah.
So actually, you have to make sure your fermentation goes well. You have to do good work, a good job, and the brew house also, because you need fermentable sugars. But you don't. If you like we talked before about the sugars, if you add some sugar, it's fully fermentable sugar, so 100% fermentable. This means this goes really. This sugar goes all the way, but the sugar that's coming from the malt, it's also more complex sugars. Not all of them are
Fermentable, sure.
fermentable. So if you do your job good in the brew house, you have a part non-fermentable and the fermentable. You want to have all these fermentable sugars fermented.
Sure. And so what I'm hearing you say is that you have a step mash process in order to make sure that you have exactly the amount of easily fermentable and harder fermentable sugars from that barley.
Yes, indeed. We do in step mash, yes. And beside that, we also make sure the other conditions are also well controlled, because a yeast can behave different under conditions. So temperature is kept under control, top pressure is kept under control. Also the time of, like we do the rooflasten, we also need to keep track on when we are adding the second batch. If you do it earlier or later, you also can have a difference in profile.
Really? How does that change the profile if it's not a full 24 hours, if it's less or if it's more?
I don't know if I want to tell that. But actually we see if we go further than 24 hours, it's worse.
Sure.
Because it's too far into the yeast is already too far in anaerobic phase, and then it doesn't get good.
So actually, you do want to add the rooflasten. You want to do it in the aerobic phase, not in the anaerobic.
We want to be into the anaerobic phase. That's not a thing. But if the fermentation is already too far, and you can, then we see it's for the aroma. It's not. Well, I don't say it's worse. Well, I don't say it's bad, but it's not better. But actually, when you have to, let's say, save a fermentation, when the problem with sometimes yeast is also an organism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it has feelings, but sometimes it doesn't want to work, or not always want to work. You have to be nice to it. So if you have to save a fermentation, then you can actually, even if it's 48 hours, if you see he doesn't want to work, you also can add extra wort with oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
But then at least you save the brew or the fermentation. But it's maybe difficult to say.
Sure. And as you were saying earlier, it's a delicate balance because you have such fermentable candy sugar
Mm-hmm.
versus harder to ferment malt sugar, and you don't want that yeast to get lazy after eating the easy sugars and not continuing there. But one other thing I'm interested in, with ester production and that ester production from the yeast is also a major component of what people associate with Belgian and Abbey beers, both the kind of fruity esters and also the lightly phenolic element of that. And for many brewers, managing yeast stress and that stress process is also a way to achieve some of that expression and some of those esters. But of course, too much stress can either cause the fermentation to stall or to fail, or even create unpleasant flavors. How do you manage that through temperature? You mentioned controlling head pressure. Tell me about how you control some of the temperature and pressure and pitch rate in order to achieve just the right amount of stress for that yeast.
Actually, we have the wort who is coming out of the brew house, the cool down wort. With this temperature is cooler than the temperature we want to have in the fermentation.
Sure.
So we let the yeast ramping up the temperature. So actually we are working around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It's difficult to recalculate. Let's say
you can always say it in Celsius if we want you to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, maybe it's easier to say. So out of the brew house, we come out of with 20 degrees. So we cool down the wort to 20 degrees. We add the yeast, put in fermentation tank. We let the yeast ramp up till the 25 degrees. So it does a free rise. Yeah, it has a free
its
rise.
own temperature.
Yeah, that's the thing. And then when we are getting to the 25 degrees, we have to cool down. Otherwise, it still is ramping up, and then the yeast destroys itself. So then we start cooling down, but we don't cool down with the cold glycol. We try to cool down with the temperature close to the fermentation temperature. For that, the yeast doesn't get any stress of the cooling. That's for example something that changed. It's not in the recipe. Before I came in the brew house, in the brewery, the temperature difference was high, so the yeast got more stress. So we tried to adapt that we have a closer temperature difference between the fermentation and the cooling liquid, the glycol. And so that makes the yeast is less stressed. It gives more subtle, more aromas.
Sure. That's really interesting. So instead of keeping glycol in
-4.
Yeah, -4 Celsius, you keep it at a warmer temperature, so that it'll still cool down that, but it just creates less of a stratification necessarily between that wort, your fermenting wort that's close to the jacket and that's further inside.
That's the thing.
Interesting. Now it would have to, of course, take longer to cool if your glycol's at a warmer temperature.
But this is during fermentation. After fermentation, when we have to cool down, we use as cold as possible to just drop down the yeast, so we can get rid of it. So we have a regulation on each fermenter, which temperature of wort which temperature of glycol we want.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's not on the brew. It's not on the recipe. It's just process, and that's the thing. I think I've done the most adapting, making things better. So
is there a way that you could describe the difference in doing it? That is there? What is, because you did it the other way before, and now you do it this way, and that's a more expensive and complex way to do it, and so it has to have a little bit of flavor impact that's worth that.
Can I ask you something? So maybe in the middle, somewhere in the middle. I guess glycol is also something that's not. We didn't use that 50 years ago. We were using different kind of cooling methods for the jackets. So I guess this is maybe newer. And we try to adapt it.
Yeah.
Maybe this is like the part you have to cut out. I don't know.
Yeah, the thing is, before I came in the brewery, we just cooled down with ice water. we changed over to because ice water we didn't had enough. We had to find something better. So we changed to glycol. Glycol was colder, has more capacity to take up the cooling,
right?
And, cooling capacity. So this step we saw we had troubles with fermentation because we went to the cool. But troubles, yeah.
Now it can cool too much.
Then we can cool too much, and the shock of it is too high. And so then we tried to find a better solution.
This method is almost using glycol to do it more like it might have been done before with ice water, where it couldn't hold as much of that cooling power.
Yeah.
But that's interesting, and I don't know that I have heard of another brewery maintaining different glycol temperatures in order to cool fermentations like that. That's it's fascinating.
Yeah. Okay.
How about in terms of head pressure? You mentioned that's something that you're also very careful about.
Yeah, that's true. So before, when I came in here, we didn't had any cylindroconical fermenters. It was all on we only had 2 fermentation tanks.
Yeah.
One big horizontal and one smaller vertical. The height of the beer was maximum 3 meters. So it gives you a lot of esters.
Right.
So, but during time, because of space, actually, we had to change to cylindroconical tanks. This makes we have to
lots of reasons: space, yeast harvesting. There's lots of good reasons to use a cylindroconical tank.
Yeah, but indeed. So we had to find a good way to keep the top pressure as low as possible without overfoaming fermenters. So
I guess it's also fair to say that our brewery has grown a lot since we arrived here. When we got here, let's say 20 years ago, Wouter, our brewery was brewing something like 8,000 20 years ago, maybe 11,000, 12,000 hectoliters 18 years ago. And right now we do 50,000. So our brewery has grown a lot, and we had to add a lot of cylindroconical tanks to be able to do that. So brewery has gotten a lot bigger.
Sure. And for American listeners listening, you can just do that hectoliter to American brewer barrels. A hectoliter is about 0.8 brewer barrels.
So about 40,000 barrels, right. I guess that's something like we're doing right now. So we're not a really, really big brewery, actually. I think there's a lot of breweries in America who do that with a much smaller installation or footprint than what we do. But of course, we do the things a little bit different. We're going to get to our bottle conditioning later, for example. Sure.
We should probably get to that soon. Having said that,
Can I say something?
Sure.
Maybe there is not. There is an ingredient we didn't mention yet. We also have the ingredient time. This makes. This is also a reason why we have a lot of fermenters, because the beer stays a long time in maturation.
Tell me about that. So fermentation takes roughly how long? 7
to 10 days. So we don't want to make the fermentation run very fast, because then we don't make enough esters. If you do a fast fermentation, then you have a lot of higher alcohols. Higher alcohols, it's also alcohol, but it's
less pleasant.
Less pleasant. So that's the thing we are pointing to, making it. There are several. I can't tell. There are other beers that do have more higher alcohols, but.
Sure. So then it goes through that initial fermentation process, and then do you use the same tank? Do you move into another tank?
We are using another tank for the maturation. So 7 to 10 days first for fermentation. Then we cool down in 1 day, maximum 2 days, depending how big the fermenter is. We're going
to then drop the yeast from that.
Then we drop the yeast. We collect if we want to reuse or not.
Sure.
Then we collect the yeast, put over to the maturation tank actually. Then it stays there for 4 to maybe 6 weeks, depending on taste, on turbidity. So if the last yeast that was, it's also settled down.
On the type of beer?
Yeah, depending on the type of beer. Yeah, a wheat beer, St. Bernardus wit, is not kept so long.
Right.
The fermentation goes also faster because of lower in alcohol, less stress.
The turbidity is a good thing in that beer.
Turbidity is also wanted over there. Yeah.
And then you ferment for about you mature for 4 to 6 weeks, let's say, and then it's ready to be bottled.
Sure.
Or kegged.
But you allow that long maturation process so that the beer also becomes more clear, and but what do you think that that process of lagering your abbey ales allows the beer to pull together flavor-wise too?
Yes.
It all comes together in the maturization, I guess. It gives you give the beer time to become a beer with a capital B.
Sure.
And the full mouthedness comes also from there.
How does the young beer finished with fermentation? How does that compare in taste and sensory to that mature beer after that maturation process?
It's difficult to describe.
Sure. It's just sensory and opinion.
Sensory, it's opinion. It's we keep a certain time for sure, but it's also it's also taste. Yeah.
I guess I've been talking to Wouter a lot of times about this, and we because I like to tell this story when I travel to the US, and it's great to hear that actually everything starts from the old recipe, and that was the way that it was done, and that's the way we still do it today, and we see the advantages in that. But there are some abbey ales that don't have this long maturization process, so we know about them as well, that they don't do it like that, but we do, and why? Well, because we've always been doing it this way. So I guess don't change a winning team or something like that, And how does it change over time? It evolves. The beer, a young, fresh beer that's not matured, or a beer that comes out of the fermenter the day before you bottle it, it's not exactly the same. But it's difficult to explain.
I think that speaks to the question that I posed at the very start about how to take these beers that everyone knows how to make them, but how do you make it distinctive and special? And that's a technique and a way to go do that. But let's then talk about the next part of the process. After that conditioning, and you keep it cold that entire time that it's conditioning.
Yes, we keep it always cold. From end of fermentation, we keep it cold till the beer goes into the bottle.
But then at this point, because bottle conditioning is another important part of this, then the temperature changes again. But talk to me about the bottle conditioning process. How do you all bottle condition these beers?
So first of all, you need to make sure your fermentation goes well. That's the first thing, that there are no fermentable sugars left. Otherwise, if you start...
Zero.
Non-fermentable.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're
gonna get in trouble. Right.
Yeah, you can make bombs.
Mm-hmm.
So this, you need to make sure that your main fermentation goes well. You have reached your end.
Final gravity.
Final gravity, yes. So what I want to explain is actually bottle conditioning. If your main fermentation goes well, then you don't have troubles in your bottle conditioning.
Then you can plan.
It's just chemistry. If you use 1 kilo sugar, then you know half of this is going to CO2 and half of it is going to alcohol. If you're looking into the main fermentation, there is your purpose to make alcohol. So you also add sugar from the malt, from the recipe. If you add 100, half of it, 50 goes to alcohol, 50 goes to CO2. And the main fermentation, we keep the alcohol. In bottle conditioning, we do it different, or we want it different. It's the same actually. The yeast gives half alcohol and half CO2. There we want CO2. If you want to have in our specs is we're going to 7.5 gram per liter CO2. So we know how many sugar we need to use. And if your main fermentation goes well, we do the math, and then we know so many sugar we know how many sugar we need to add, and then it's done.
What kind of sugar do you then use for bottle conditioning?
For bottle conditioning, we use an how it's called, dextrose. It's a 100% fermentable sugar to make sure this goes as smooth as possible. We don't want to make any difficulties for the yeast.
It's not going to make any strange flavors either.
No.
As a bottle conditions.
Yeah. The difference is when you do a bottle conditioning, you also like I said, we make half of the sugar is changing into CO2. The other half is going into alcohol. So actually, in one, you're getting some more alcohol in these bottle conditions bottles.
Sure.
So, and this also gives some extra flavor. If you have sometimes, our kegs are not conditioned. So these beers are
a little less alcohol in the kegged version.
Yes, but we add CO2, and then this makes
forced carbonated.
Forced carbonated, yes. If you compare a beer from draft or a beer from the bottle, you're getting faster drunk from a beer in a bottle comparing to a beer from draft. But also you have more taste from a bottle than from draft. And then you see people who are talking about a beer, they drink this one rather like this one more from draft, the other one they rather like it more from the bottle. So it's interesting.
Do they like the lower ABV styles from draft for that lower ABV, or is it
not always, I guess?
Yeah.
No.
So people are changing. Like for example, I really like our Christmas ale on draft, but I love the Up 12 in a bottle. So it's kind of
sure. Do you bottle condition with the same yeast that your initial fermentation takes place with?
I know there's a lot of home brewers over there who might want to harvest our yeast from a bottle or something. So,
but they can't.
They can't. It's not the same.
Yeah. That's understandable.
Yeah. But I don't know if that was your answer as well, Wouter. Sorry, I'm nodding over here. Okay.
Not that yeast, especially in a high alcohol environment in a bottle, would be in very good shape after it gets to the United States in order to properly make some beer. So, yeah. So the last part of this bottle conditioning, then you've now kept this beer cold and conditioning in a tank. You then add dextrose, some sugar, you add your bottling yeast, you mix, but you also need to bring that beer, that to a temperature where that yeast can work at a much warmer temperature again. Talk to me about that process.
So we're going to for filling the beer, we go into 17 degrees. So at that level that's the temperature level we can fill So we're filling the beer at 17 degrees, going to the hot room. I don't know
The warm room. Yeah.
Warm room. There we keep even a higher temperature. We go into 24 degrees. It's one big warm room where all the batches are going in. Before we did smaller rooms, but we saw it was too much fluctuation on the temperature. So now we are doing one big warm room. So when a batch comes in or another one goes out, it's doesn't impact that much on the temperature.
The temperature doesn't fluctuate as much as in the past, I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing.
How much of the carbonation is then produced in that re-fermentation? Obviously that yeast through the fermentation process is creating carbonation. Do you maintain at some point some head pressure on that and some carbonation in the beer that you then increase with bottle conditioning, or do you allow that to, all of that carbon dioxide from fermentation to release and then fully carbonate through bottle conditioning?
We, as we are also a new brewery or let's say a modern brewery, it's maybe a better word. We keep pressure on the fermentation. After fermentation, we keep pressure on from maturation on the maturation tanks, also on the bright beer tanks, just to make sure if there is to keep the CO2 into the beer. But this will be around 3.2 gram per liter CO2 that's inside the beer. It's not that much.
So about half as much as what you really need.
Then and for the rest we add sugar to do bottle conditioning.
Yeah, but it's still enough to keep the beer safe from too much oxygen in that process. Yeah. Always interesting when we look at bottling or canning conditioned beer like that. So many American brewers are canning fully carbonated beer, and it's interesting to see bottling beer with much less carbonation, which changes that whole packaging process, for brewers. Nonetheless, let's zoom out here as we finish and talk about big picture. St. Bernardus is now thinking, again, as a modern brewery around new projects, even thinking about collaborations now. You have some new things in the works that are a little different and maybe a little more open and a little more working together than it all may have been in decades of the past. Talk to me about taking on and approaching some of these kind of collaborative projects and some of the exciting things that you all are now starting to work more on.
Well, I know maybe in a moment we can talk a little bit about the collabs that we have set up right now.
Collabs, it's such a fun modern word.
I guess, yeah. But I do want to talk about something else first, if it's okay with you.
Sure.
I want you to know that or maybe you know this already, but maybe the listeners don't. We also have a small brewery in Ypres. It's called Kazematten. It's a brewery that is half owned by the owners of our brewery and is half owned by Rudy Gekiere. He is the guy behind Rodenbach.
Sure.
He actually retired last week or 2 weeks ago. So he's been working there for 42 years. He is.
We've had Rudy on the podcast years ago.
He's the authority on Vlaams Brewing, I guess, and he knows a lot about a lot of beers, and it was awesome to work with him in the past decade, because it's 10 years that we've had the brewery together, and to create smaller new beers with him. And I think Wouter has been working with him as well, so he could learn from that. I guess that this was our I know it doesn't sound like that, but this was our first collab, our first collaboration that didn't come into the fruit wasn't a beer that we brewed together, but at least it was, or not a beer that we brewed together that is worldwide distributed, but this was like really awesome to see such a small brewery and to have these small batches where we could do really nice things together.
Well, let's talk about some of the other collaborations that you have on the horizon.
So yeah, I guess also about 10 years ago, me and Marcus from Wijn Stefan, Marcus Englet, he has my job at Wijn Stefan, and we have a lot of common importers all over the world, and we became friends. And we ran into each other here and there, and it was always nice to be on the road together. For example, in Spain or in Holland, and we were talking about where we could export our beers. And he tried to help me a little bit, and I tried to help him. And he said, "Well, we don't have an importer in Belgium yet. Can you help me? Can you tell me who I could convince to buy my beers in Belgium?" I started looking for it. I couldn't find anybody, and in the end, I told him, "You know what? We'll do it. We'll be your importer." So we had never imported a beer, but we import theirs since a decade now, and we distribute it together with our beers here in Belgium, and it's working well for us. It's not a huge sales, but it's really nice that a lot of our customers can find Wijn Stefan in Belgium as well now. And from the very early start, we were like winking to each other, "Hey, we should make a beer together, and that would be great." But it kind of took us about a decade to finally make one. And last year, we finally decided that we're gonna make it happen, and we got together, and we made a beer. So it's called Brouwpact 2024, and it's Wijn Stefan, a blonde ale brewed at their facility. But we helped design the beer, and also Wouter was a huge part in that.
Yeah, together with Tobias, the brewmaster of Wijn Stefan, we got some discussions how we want to make a beer. They had some ideas, we had some ideas, so we had to put things together. Yeah, actually, but I wanted to say, so like I said before, the yeast is something, but you also have the conditioning. The condition where the yeast is working in, if you use more top pressure or if you another temperature, you get another beer. So that's what we try to do. We use the Wijn Stefan yeast, but use this yeast on other conditions to have another flavor.
To get a more Belgian flavor from it?
Yeah, so we went a little bit more to the phenolic side instead of the more ester side.
Uh-huh.
We went a little bit more to the phenolic side, and actually it's worked well.
Hey, Wouter, it's a fantastic beer. You can say it. I know you're very proud of it. So,
thank you.
That's fun.
So the fun part about that collab that we did this year is that we're also in the middle of making a new one that will be brewed at our facility, and that will be on the market next year. So it's very, very exciting to see, to be involved in that, and knowing that it's going to be on the market next year. So we're very, very, very excited about that.
Will that use your yeast in order to make it taste more like a Wijn Stefan yeast, or?
Well, this is not yet
still
defined.
working on
it's still working on it, trying to find some ideas. Actually, it's using ingredients from the other brewery and putting some things together. Other conditions, it's making. We don't know if it's still into research. Let's say.
Yeah, we're still investigating what we're gonna do, and but it will be. It's just awesome to do that kind of thing, to try and create something new. Is not something that we get to do every day here. We don't make a new beer every year. We don't make 126 new beers a year. There's breweries who do that, and for us, it's just a great project. So very, very excited about it.
But fun to, you're right, there are breweries, many places that make 2 new beers every week or something crazy like that. And it's a different rhythm here, but at the same time, it's a different for both breweries, both old, storied, well-respected brands. In order to then come together, the expectations become very high for whatever you all make, and it needs to reflect on both of those brands in a great way. Mm-hmm. But it's fun to see that even now, even for both of these brands, that creating new experiences and staying up to date, but also sharing and learning with each other is just as important to you as it is for many smaller breweries. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, might be a good place to bring this to a close. Choose G&D Chillers on your next expansion or brewery startup and receive 1 free year of remote control and monitoring. Take your operations to the next level with the experts at ProBrew. Old Orchard is the go-to source for fruit-forward ingredients for some of the biggest names in the craft brewing landscape. Omega Yeast's Daybreak 5 gives you juicy, modern hop flavors without the haze. ABS Commercial are proud to offer brewhouses, tanks, keg washers, and preventative maintenance parts to brewers across the country. Get your order in now for the 7th annual Veterans Blend from Yakima Chief Hops. Berkeley yeast strains are designed to improve flavor, quality, and consistency. And if you're a distiller or curious about it, check out the Craft Spirits and Distilling podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast and any others, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, and let us know that the content that we produce for you matters to you. Your subscription goes a long way for helping us continue to bring you these great conversations with phenomenal brewers all across the world. Marco, if people want to learn more about St. Bernardus, the beer itself, to taste the beer, to experience the brewery here in Wouter, to maybe even come and stay at the guest house, the brewery house, like Joe and I did last night, which is a beautiful place, beautiful rooms, just a spectacular experience, of course, right next door to the brewery. How can they learn more, find more, come experience more of St. Bernardus?
I always explain it this way. If you want to come and stay here, you just go out to a store, buy a case of beer, take out a bottle and scan the QR code that's on the back. When you get home, drink that whole crate of beer, and then book yourself a stay.
Then make the best decision after
drinking those beers, and come and do a pilgrimage to the region. We talked about us. We talked about the area as well. There's some really nice breweries in the neighborhood as well. We're right on the border here.
And it's the hop growing region.
It's the hop growing region. We have our own hop field right next door. You can see it from the rooftop. We have a really nice rooftop bar with panoramic 360 views. The old brew house, the brewer's house, the old cheese factory became a brewer's house, and now is a bed and breakfast, a guest house that you can stay in. Really, really nice rooms. Awesome breakfast.
Excellent.
So I guess
Chef Philip did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, Philip is awesome. We also have bikes for rent, e-bikes. To be clear, so you can ride to the other breweries in our area, because it's up and down a little bit here and there. So
your definition of up and down is different from mine, where I live in Colorado on the edge of the mountains. So but I hear what you're saying.
Well, the thing is also, if you come and stay here, you don't want to use a car and you want to be relaxed, and not everybody is a cyclist, so
sure.
You don't want to be all sweaty when you get to West-Flatteren and have a drink at In de Vrede. You want to do it relaxed, and then you can You don't have to drive a car. You just take your bike and you come back and visit our brewery, which is really awesome. And you can do it on your own tempo. We try to create a nice experience for everybody who wants to come and experience our beers in-house. And don't tell anybody, but you guys know there's a fridge in the bed and breakfast.
There
in
is the
Honesty
Bar.
Honesty Bar. So
we took advantage of that last night.
Yeah, that's nice too. So you always have a really good nightcap. I guess you guys did a good. You slept well, right?
We slept well last night. It's beautiful and refined in the countryside here. It's a little foggy today, but it adds a nice moody calmness, to everything. But it's a beautiful experience out here, and I can't wait to come back sometime and bring my own bike with me and spend some time riding the small country roads around here through the beautiful countryside.
There's actually a classic race that is every year held here. It's called Gent-Wevelgem.
Oh, Gent-Wevelgem, yeah.
And it passes by the brewery every year, so you can come and check it out. And it does Bonte Cats as well. So yeah, it's a really nice area to come and cycle.
Sounds like a great reason to come back, and I can't wait to do it. But in the meantime, Wouter and Marco, thanks for joining me for the podcast. It's been wonderful talking with you about brewing beer. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media @craftbeerbrew.